Hey everybody, Tony D. And Little Joan. I thought I'd do a separate video on the Marvel stuff since it's kind of a little deeper. I don't want to make one big video. Make shorter videos. Huge Doctor Strange 2 leak may have spoiled Marvel's new villain. Not really. No. Doctor Strange's villains were never that big a deal. He didn't have good villains. He had very crazy, esoteric type villains that no one really remembers. You know, they had a guy with I think he had like a flaming head, and he had the medallion too. Doctor Strange was a cool character. Don't get me wrong, but his adventures were a little more surreal. So, it's amazing. Back in the day when I tried to convince the Hollywood guys of how comics work, they all called me, yeah, it don't work that way. Now that they're, deep in the comics and have essentially bought every one of them in existence, now they act like the comic book companies did, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel for characters, and they can't understand why they're still not working. They can't understand it. They're going to ride this into a ditch, in my view. All the Marvel stuff is going right into a ditch, and I don't care. I just don't care anymore. I used to be a pretty big, comic fanatic, but this is exactly what happened in comics. It started out super strong, and the main characters were big. Iron Man, the Hulk, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Wolverine, etc., etc. They all started very strong, and people loved them. Then, over the years, they had this pattern to sell more comics, and the pattern went something like, you would take the Avengers, and after a while, you would spin off all the Avengers characters into their own books, and keep them out of the Avengers, and try to sell new characters with the Avengers. So, eventually, the Avengers lineup, you didn't even recognize them. It was like, who are these guys? Thor wasn't in it. Captain America wasn't in it. Hulk wasn't in it. Hawkeye kind of kept coming back because he couldn't support his own book. And quite frankly, the Avengers aren't the Avengers without Cap. You need the Cap. If you don't have Cap, I mean, you could do without Thor once in a while. He gets, a little old. Same thing with the Hulk, but you can't have the Avengers without Cap, and then they would for years. And one of the characters is Hank Pym, Ant-Man. He's one of the old-time members. Ant-Man, Giant Man, Pym Particles. Of course, they set him up in the Disney movies differently, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what they've done. And they're following the same pattern as comic books. They've run things out. But instead of running out, what would happen in comics is they would move the art team and the writing team to a lesser known comic to try to build that up. And then they would keep running the Avengers, let's say, with new guys who nobody ever heard of, and people would still buy it because it was so continuing. You didn't want to break up your run. And if the story suffered in quality, you'd be like, well, maybe it'll get better. But there were hardcore guys. They didn't want to break up their run. And eventually the comic book companies knew that. And until the sales plummeted, they wouldn't put the good A teams on those books. They would put the B and C teams. They'd put the A teams on the new stuff they were trying to get you to buy. And so in this case, the problem in Hollywood is eventually actors, for these kinds of characters. I mean, Chris Hemsworth is going to get older. And eventually you're not going to be able to drive a big enough truckload of money to his house to do Thor. He's just either going to say no, or he's going to say, give me more money. You can't pay these guys less for a sequel. Although I think Chris Hemsworth you could negotiate with. He's not like an American actor. American actors tend to want more. A guy like him, he's perfect. I think he's perfectly fine. He'd have played Thor until he couldn't do it anymore. I think it's more that the woke have taken over, and they're going to try to shoehorn in the Jane Foster character. They have no idea that Jane Foster has zero support from the fan base. Absolutely zero. Literally tens of people want to see that. And most of them are on Twitter, and most of them don't buy comics. The idea that there's a big enough fan base for a Jane Foster Thor, like as if Thor is not a guy's name or a god's name. It is a character, a title that you aspire to. No, that's not what it is. Thor is the god of thunder in Norse mythology. He's a guy. He's a specific entity. You don't get to be Thor. There's only one Thor. But nevertheless, Marvel seems determined to go down this road. And Disney, I should say. So a big leak hit. Huge Marvel leak. What is this from? Inverse. Special thanks to Jeremy at the Quartering who went through this first. And I saw it and I had to add my 2 cents. So usually leaks can be dismissed as stabs into the dark until they're revealed. We're really going to see the White Vision, or yes, that's really Elaine from Seinfeld as a villainous Contessa, I guess. I mean, I don't even remember the Contessa, and I read comics. So some of these characters are really obscure. They never got popular. So here are a couple of highlights according to Inverse. The Greek gods are coming. Thor, Love, and Thunder with Russell Crowe as Zeus. So what? So what? The Greek gods were never a big thing in the Marvel Universe. The only thing that was big in the Greek gods in the Marvel Universe was Hercules. They brought in a version of Hercules. He replaced Thor in the Avengers. He was like the second-rate Thor. He wasn't, the Greek gods weren't that big because they were bigger over at DC where they were tied into Wonder Woman. And they tied in Wonder Woman as the daughter of Hercules at one point. Idris Elba will not only be back in the next Thor, but will have a role in Loki. Well, good for him. Clint Barton will retire at the end of Hawkeye, and this time it's for real. Yeah, you say that, but just like in comics, you can't rely on that. But that probably is true because Disney's trying to push the woke successor to Hawkeye, which is his daughter. And okay, whatever. There are actors who may be cast in undisclosed roles within the MCU. Charlie Hunnam. Now, Jeremy at the Quarter didn't recognize the name, but I do. He's the lead character from the Sons of Anarchy. So, I could see him being a superhero. I'm not sure which one he's been cast at, but... Nicole Laja, I don't know that one. Kiara Shipka, I don't know. Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey's probably going to get a villain. He's not going to get a lead role anymore because he's too old. Would be my guess. Gwendolyn Christie, Michelle Dockery, Richard Armitage. Oh, Kianan Shipka. She's this girl from Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. Yeah, like who cares? Who cares about any of these? The entire Marvel universe is unraveling because they can't sustain it, just like they couldn't sustain it in comics. You can't have a great writer and art team and then keep moving them around. The fans didn't follow some of them did. They would follow the art team and writer, but you would build something. Chris Claremont built something with the X-Men that nobody else did. He did it for almost 20 years. That's why the X-Men were so huge and had so many characters. Loki and Thor, the only reason Tom Hiddleston is the only reason Loki's still around, essentially. He's great in the role. He loves it. He's willing to do it. Would have been great to see Thor, Chris Hemsworth do something, but he's a movie character, and now they're finally doing this thing where they go back and forth between Disney Plus and the movies. But there's a huge problem with that. Just like Marvel had a huge problem. There are some people, they only want to see certain things. So try as you might, jamming Spider-Man into everything didn't always boost your sales. Now, in the world of comics, it boosted the sales in the stores because store owners would anticipate, and since they buy things on a non-returnable basis, they had to anticipate sales, and they would tend to buy more if Spider-Man was a guest in a different comic or whatever. But it's not the same for movie audiences. It's just not the same. They can't crank out. First off, they can't crank out the movies fast enough. They can't get them out as fast as comics. No way. I mean, you're gonna tell me 2 years from now people are gonna remember all this stuff, all the connections? They've already forgotten half of them. Because if you weren't a comic fanatic, you didn't even know half the characters in Endgame. Endgame's like way in the rearview mirror, and it's old. It's now considered old. It's in that category of old. So what are you going to do for the next group of kids? They don't know who. Half the the new kids coming in won't know the characters because you're not constantly showing them. And these aren't the popular characters. Once you burn through all the popular characters and get down to the crumbs, what do you expect? It's a law of diminishing returns. And Hiddleston's great. Don't get me wrong, but Loki's a bad guy. Again, he has the same problem that all the bad guys have. You can't build nobody cares after a while. He's a bad character. He's evil. He goes to jail. He doesn't get out. Thor fights him. But there's this bizarre idea that, at least this comes mostly from the left, that somehow we're going to make the bad guys good. Okay, good luck with that. It won't work. The problem with it is, good guys are guys you want to aspire to. Bad guys are guys you don't care about. You care about the good guys. When they do something nice for people, you say, oh, he's a good guy. I hope he survives the movie, or I hope he saves the day. I want to see him win. I don't want to see Loki win. He's a jerk. Right? It's fun. Now, the only way you can juxtapose a guy like Loki is you need a guy who's more powerful and a bigger jerk. And he's a god. So they got Owen Wilson as a guy who could control time and control Loki, apparently, but it's not going to work. It's just not. It's just not going to work. Loki's not meant to have his own series. As talented and as great as Tom Hiddleston is, and I love to see him, I wish they'd give him his own show, but not this. Not Loki. Loki's a bad dude. But I guess, Disney's going to have to learn the hard way. They're going to have to learn what Marvel Comics eventually figured out. There's a limited amount of money in this stuff. And you could have ran it forever, but you've decided to go woke. Get woke, go broke. That's what's going to happen. Eventually, they're going to be begging for Robert Downey Jr. to come back, and they will. They'll get him back. But by that time, people will be so sick of the movie, nobody will want to say it. And, they'll be on to, the next big thing, whatever that is. And it'll be a shame because, I think it was Downey who really made the entire thing work. Not just his characters, but his performance and the way he handled himself. They just, like the Roman Empire, you can only expand so far before it collapses. Things are collapsing. Phase 4 will just be an endless stream of movies that don't quite come together. Now, some of the movies look okay. I mean, Shang-Chi, from what I saw, looked okay. Looked watchable. I'd watch it, once. I mean, I have no interest in Black Panther 2. Black Panther, unfortunately, the actor passed on, and I have no interest in seeing his sister in the role. It's going to be a woke mess. Sounds like to me. I wanted to see a Black Widow movie when the character was alive. Now that she's dead, I have zero interest in it, and it's a prequel. So, what am I going to get out of that? David Arbour's in it. I'm sure he's going to say something stupid and woke. I mean, it just sounds uninteresting to me. Love and Thunder looks like an absolute train wreck. I'm going to probably refuse to see that one. Doctor Strange 2, I might go see. I mean, you're going to have the multiverse, so you're going to have the crazy versions of all the Marvel characters. I mean, that's kind of fun if you know, if you're steeped in Marvel lore. It'll be fun for me. I don't know, for like 90% of the movie audience will be like, what is this? An alternate universe? Why? Like, who cares? Yeah, who cares? It's fun for, comic geeks like myself. I don't think it's fun for a general audience. It's like they're going to try to do What If. Well, What If had the same problem in the Marvel U. Like, What If was a great comic when it first came out because at the time the Marvel U was edited correctly and the world made sense. Like, all the issues were edited in such a way that they were all consistent. If something happened in Avengers, then Captain America would be in Captain America comics going, oh, that was a daring do. Oh my. Well, now I have to fight the Red Skull. It would all come together. So when you did a What If, you were like, oh wow, this isn't the way it happened because it was so consistent in the normal universe. But then comics unraveled. Editors, they just didn't do their jobs anymore. Nobody cared. It turned, I believe that being a Marvel editor turned into the lowest paid position in the publishing world or something. Nobody seemed to be interested in making the universe work anymore. A few big names tried to pull it together. Guys like Bendis would try to pull it together, but it wasn't the same. They weren't on the same page. It was too many cooks spoiling the stew, a combination of that and too many visions that just don't really come together. And you can only do so many of these big, giant events. And that was another big problem. They really needed to stop doing them. And they need to stop doing them, but they can't. They can't because it's where all the money is, and they chase the money now. So, while comics disintegrates, it's funny to watch movies follow the same damn path. So, they're making the same mistake. Will they be able to make some good movies? Yeah. Will they come together like Endgame? No way. No way are they going to make that come together. No. Not if they're going down the woke path of like forcing you to like certain characters and therefore they tell you which ones are more important. No. It's not the way it works. Iron Man worked because, like the comics, it was more organic. Iron Man was not the center of the universe in the Marvel U. No, it was Spider-Man. Spider-Man was the center of the universe, and the Fantastic Four. The X-Men, a few others. So the balance in the movies changed because Iron Man was a big hit and Robert Downey Jr. is just so amazing that they hung the universe on Iron Man. That's not the way the comics rolled out. But that was organic, so they went with that, and that was good. Now who are they going with? Doctor Strange is not strong enough on his own. They're not going to get Cumberbatch to come back for a third movie, especially when this one does okay, but not great. Spider-Man, still big. You need Iron Man. You need him. You need the Hulk. You need all the big names. You need the Fantastic Four, which they still can't make work for some reason. And now, with all this woke stuff, it's just killing them. It's just killing them. They're not having fun anymore. They're not set out to have a big spectacular. And who's going to movie theaters now? Nobody. Thank you, blue states. So that's the state of the Marvel U. Who cares? At this point, I'm done. You've cured me, Marvel. You've cured me of my comic book addiction. I have almost zero emotional connection now to my comic book collection, and then maybe I'll sell it off. get some sweet, sweet cash and invest in, some other collectibles or comics that don't break my heart. Think on that.